Hi everyone, this is Jerry, and this is a game analysis between an unknown player, approximately 1900 rating strength, versus Howard Stern, the king of all media, Howard Stern. This game was played sometime in 2008 online, and in this game Howard was playing the black pieces. He played the Budapest Defense, which had his opponent admitting defeat after only 11 moves. Rating and commenting this video are appreciated, and any questions you have for me, feel free to send one my way. Hope you enjoy the video. White opens the game with the move pawn to d4. Howard responds with knight to f6, a developing move. Pawn to c4, and this move is made in order to have a flank pawn control a central square. If black were to follow up in this position with a move like pawn to d5, that wouldn't be good as a result of pawn takes pawn, and now regardless of how black recaptures on the d5 square, white will be able to speed up their development. For example, queen takes pawn would run into knight to c3, developing move and attacking the queen. The queen would have to move. And if knight captures pawn, we would see pawn to e4 attacking the knight, and that allows the bishop to come out along this diagonal. Instead of pawn to d5, black chooses to play pawn to e5, signaling what's referred to as the Budapest Gambit or the Budapest Defense. And the idea that this has is to speed up your own development. For example, if white were to take the pawn, the knight can respond by playing to either e4 or g4. Let's just say knight to e4. Just some follow-up moves that black would have from this variation is to play a knight to c6, the bishop might come to c5, or even b4. We would see castle, and at some point black is going to strike at this pawn with a move like pawn to d6 or pawn to f6. So these are just some things that would occur if white were to take on the e5 square. But we don't see that. Instead, the move pawn to d5 was played in the actual game. Howard follows up with bishop to c5, a developing move, a good move, and it's important to play this bishop out here prior to this pawn coming to d6. That way the bishop is an attacking piece instead of being stuck behind your own pieces. And after this we see pawn to h3, a non-developing move. This is a strictly preventative move. I'm assuming white's intention was to stop the knight from coming to g4, where it would be adding pressure to f2. However, what's best to play in this position is maybe a move like knight to c3, focusing on getting the minor pieces out. Pawn to h3 is not a developing move, and now this is going to run into some serious problems for white because Howard's now able to rip into the white position and attack the white king with bishop takes f2, an excellent move. After king takes bishop, we're going to see the move that was played is knight to e4, checking the king. And from here, the white king has a few choices. I'm just going to cover a couple moves. If king here, that would run into a mate in 2, queen to h4. The only move is to block, and now queen takes pawn is mate. And if instead we see king here, that would run into knight to g3, it's attacking the rook. Rook move, and now we would see queen to g5 checking the king. From here there's a few variations. I'm just going to touch on each very quickly. If king here, that will run into queen to f5, forking the king and bishop. And after a move, let's say like king to c3, we would see queen takes bishop. Black has regained the material and is actually up a pawn at this point in the game. If instead the king were to play here, that would run into pawn to e4 check, king to f2, queen to h4, threatening a discovered attack on the king after this knight were to move. And so from here, if white were to play a move like knight to c3, that's going to run into a mate in 2. Knight to f5 check, pawn to g3, the only move, queen captures pawn is mate. And so if the king tries to go here, that would run into knight captures bishop check, queen captures knight, queen to g3, forking the king and rook. That will regain the material. And if the king were to run back home, that would run into knight to f5 check. If king here, that would run into queen to f4, forking the king and rook yet again. And if instead pawn block, queen captures pawn, rook block, the rook is now pinned, that would run into pawn to e3, getting ready to take the rook. And I believe the best that white can do here is just to take the pawn, allow the knight to recapture, and black has yet again regained the material, and white is in rough shape, seeing how this knight here is a giant monster. It's attacking the pawn, queen, bishop. It has thoughts of coming to c2, where if it's allowed to get there, it'd be forking the king and rook. And also this queen is a giant pest, seeing how she's pinning the rook to the king. So these are all just some what-ifs. The only other option from here is king to f2. That will result in a checkmate in 6. If you'd like to, pause the video and see if you can find this solution. It's a checkmate in 6 problem. Okay, the solution is knight to e4, checking the king. If the king runs home, it's going to just run into checkmate in one move. So king to f3 is the best thing to do, and that's going to run into now a mate in 5 from this point. And all of the white moves that I make now are only moves. Queen to g3 check, king takes knight, pawn to f5 check, king takes pawn, pawn to d6 discovered check, king to e4, bishop to f5 check, king takes bishop, queen to g6, and that's mate. This is actually an important variation to know about from the game that actually did occur. From this position here, the actual move was king to f3, attacking the knight and stopping the knight from coming to g3. From here, Howard continued queen to h4, guarding the knight, and with the idea of coming to g3 with that checkmate that I just showed you, with the pawn coming here, here, bishop out, etc. And so white responded with pawn to g4, interfering with the queen's communication with the knight, and so king captures knight is now the threat. And the best move in this position is the one that Howard played, pawn to f5. Not only defending the knight, but threatening to checkmate by moving the queen here or here to deliver mate. And so we see now pawn captures pawn, and now this allows more pieces to get involved to attack the white king. Howard follows up with rook to f8, essentially adding more fuel to the fire. Probably just slightly better, although it really doesn't matter in this game, is just a castle. Why not get the king safe and allow the rook to contribute to the attack? As it turns out, it really doesn't matter whatsoever in this game. The black king is not any more vulnerable on e8 than g8. And so after rook to f8, white anticipates the rook grabbing the pawn with check, and so just starts to try and run away, but he's not going to run too far. So king to e3. At this point, the knight could come here. This is one variation that would win as well. Knight to f2, forking the queen and rook. If queen here, we don't take the rook right away because we would lose our queen. Instead, we would play a move like queen to d4, check the king, and after king to f3, now we take the rook. But in the actual game, we see from here rook takes pawn, and this threat is still in mind as well as the one that did occur in the game. We see now knight to f3 attacking the queen. The queen plays to f4, check. King to d3, the only move. And now knight to f2, forking the king, queen, and rook. And at this point in the game, white resigns, and for good reason. If the king were to play here, we would just have knight takes queen, check. And that's a serious loss of material, and black is winning. And the only other move is king to c2, and we don't take the queen right away because we have to take into account that our queen is being attacked. And so first we make an in-between move. We can move the queen either e4 or grab the pawn. Moving here is more accurate because of follow-up continuations. That would run into king to d2, knight takes queen, king takes knight, and the fireworks aren't over just yet. That'll run into rook takes knight, pawn takes rook would lead to queen takes pawn, forking the king and rook, and the black queen is essentially turning into a Pac-Man at this point and gobbling up all of the white pieces. And if white were to try a move like bishop to g2, that would just run into rook check, pawn takes rook, queen takes bishop, and once again the queen is ready to gobble up a lot of the white pieces. And so this was actually the final position in the game, where the knight came to f2 and forked the king, queen, and the rook. which had white admitting defeat. So that's all for this video. I hope you got something out of it. Take care. Bye.